So to give a very brief introduction, I don't want to give away too much information from the presentation, but I'm going to introduce Ashwini. Um, uh, like I said, I'm going to try to keep it brief, but I've got two paragraphs here. Exploring the deep relationship between the human and non-human, between the constructed and the inherited, Ashwini creates sculptures inviting viewers to interact with the related and the hidden. Trained in wheel throwing methods, Bhat transitioned to hand building in order to expand and better articulate her passion for form. She often introduces, excuse me, every time I have a sentence transition right at the top. She often introduces radical but somehow familiar shapes that should suggest the complex interplay between the landscape and the body. Bhat's work addresses concerns that are distinctively international, noting, if I can speak several languages, if I can call my background in literature and dance, perhaps I can apply my distinctive experience to my own work in order to cross some of the borders that keep empathy, feeling, and even beauty bound. I will allow Ashwini to talk about her education and publication. There is a list on Northern Clay Center's website. She has shown internationally, been published in so many periodicals, permanent collections, and is actually curating the 77th, I lost my page, but curating a show that is opening in 2022, 77th annual exhibition. And we're absolutely thrilled to have you with us. So I will turn the mic over to Ashwini.
Thank you, Kyle, for that generous introduction. Thank you also to the McKnight Foundation, everybody at Northern Clay Center, and special thanks to you, Kyle, for brainstorming with me in the last few months to arrive at this point where I'm now able to continue the residency program from my own studio. I'm hoping that there will be other residency programs in the country and in the world who will look at NCC's this plan as an example, and this could be a new way of existing in the world, even when we go back to whatever the new normal is. I have my time set here for about 35 minutes. And I want to open the conversation, the platform open for conversation after that. And by that time, if some of you who are not camera shy, if you can show your faces, that would be really wonderful to feel some kind of contact in this impersonal space. I will start the screen sharing. Can everybody see the screen and hear me? Hand gestures.
We should be all good to go on both fronts.
Perfect, thanks. I was born in the southwest coast of India. I had to look for my birthplace is called Puttur. The place is so small that unless you're looking for it, you won't find it in any maps. So I put a Google search for Puttur and Pondicherry, two places which helped me be the person who I am today. And miraculously, I found a map which shows both. So Puttur is on the west coast and Pondicherry is on the east coast. I am born in a matriarchal, highly unusually supportive family. I'm the fourth of the four daughters. My father was a high school headmaster. Both my parents were highly ahead of their own times. And I'm the first one in the family who is a full-time artist. And I kind of owe that to my family, who have supported me even during the times when they haven't fully understood, or when they didn't have a vocabulary to understand what I was seeking from this life. Um, I started learning Bharatanatyam, which is a Southern Indian classical dance form, at a very young age. I continued studying it for about 17 years before joining a contemporary dance company. As you can see, the classical form now has become highly ornamental, narrative, and from there I moved to working with the dance group, which was highly experimental, bearing the ornamentation down to bare minimum. It allowed me to explore a new way of using my traditional dance training, but explore new possibilities. But the more I performed, there was this nagging feeling that it may not be the right material for me. And it took me about 2 to 3 years to finally stop dancing. From the time I wanted to dance, I wanted to stop dancing. In that interim time, it felt like if I left behind what I did my entire adult life, I wouldn't have any identity. I also didn't have a new ready material I was moving into. So in some ways, clay happened to me. And once I found the material, it was truly liberating to have this material outside of my body, which allowed me to stretch it, reform it, even break it without really breaking any real bones. And the more I worked with clay, I also saw that some of these preoccupations remained the same, although the material was new. I was looking at bodies coming together in sculptural forms, what happened between these bodies. The positive spaces became as important as the negative spaces between the objects. So those kind of preoccupations continued in my practice. My entire studio practice and life has been about adapting to change. So I'm pretty sure I'll be able to figure something out with this Zoom. The way I encountered clay was also kind of unusual, because this is the kind of scene I entered to. This is my teacher. His name is Ray Meeker. I used to escape the place I used to live when I was part of this dance group and take just like a 2-day or a 3-day trip over the weekend, and would hang out with artists, artist friends, friends, just trying to see what I wanted to do next if I stopped dancing. In one of those chance encounters, I ended up watching Ray, who perhaps be the tallest man in Pondicherry. The average height of an Indian male is 5'5" to 5'10". Ray was this 6'5" tall, giant person wearing Indian clothes, working on a sculpture 3 times larger than him. This is the kind of material introduction I had. So I chose clay in some ways for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to be Ray's student. 2, I thought if I was leaving behind something I did my entire life, I wanted to start at ground zero. I wanted to make all the mistakes possible and be able to laugh at myself and make a fool of myself and completely find a new joy in a new material. So in some ways, Ray's work channeled my restlessness through a particular material. Ray, that's the finished sculpture there, built in 11 sections, and it's 21 feet tall. On the right upper side, you see Golden Ridge Pottery, which is the, I don't know what to call it. It's not a school. It's not only a production place. I would say it is almost like a gathering place for clay lovers. It started under a thatched roof in 1971. Ray's partner, Deborah, was interested in Eastern philosophy, and she was following the writings of a spiritual guru called Sri Aurobindo. That's what brought her to Pondicherry. She got into a project to set up a pottery unit in Pondicherry. She needed someone to come and help her build a kiln. Ray had background in ceramics, but he was primarily an architect. So when she called him to come build a kiln, it was also an first India experience for him. So he came as a tourist. He came down. High fire stoneware is only about 50 to 60 years old in India. Traditionally, it's all earthenware. So even to find the right brick to build this kiln, which would fire to stoneware temperature, they had to place orders. They had to place several orders for raw materials to come from all over India. And they kept waiting for raw materials to arrive. And when you are in India, adding a couple of months to a deadline is considered normal. But in this case, Ray extended his visa month after month. Raw materials arrived 8 months later. They built a kiln. By then, they were in love, and Ray never left. In some ways, there's some use for things not happening according to plan, especially in my country. I definitely thank the delay, because otherwise I wouldn't have met Ray. In some ways, it wouldn't be an exaggeration if I say that Ray and Deborah, along with Golden Ridge Pottery, they revolutionized the studio pottery movement in India, and also brought in absolutely new aesthetic to the country. This is a display of just 6 contemporary artists. Of course, I can name 50 other contemporary artists who are still working and making amazing work in India, or diasporic artists. But I chose these 6 because people in and around NCC will get to see their work this fall. The show which Robert Silverman is putting together, which is India focused, has these 6 artists, 7th one being me, and there is another artist from Chicago. It's also curious to me that out of 8 artists, 7 artists know each other or have come in contact with one another directly or indirectly through Golden Ridge Pottery. That kind of shows you the extent to which India is a large country, billions of people. You are aware of that, and within that situation, for us to meet as artists, in some ways, artists came to Golden Ridge. When you were working in Golden Ridge, people like Susan Peterson, Betty Woodman, Jack Troy. Even in my own time, I took Jack Troy's workshop, Jeff Shapiro's workshop, everything in this small little town, which people may not even know the existence of this pottery, but the world is kind of coming to the students when you're learning there. I think the importance of Golden Bridge is also, it's important to mention a little bit about the context of ceramics in India. Um, Primarily, the ceramics which were used and produced was all earthenware, terracotta. Um, it is closely linked to complex structures like caste system. You are born in the potter's caste, and uh, and you are labeled as untouchable because you're born in the lowest caste. But this is where the complexity and contradictions of India is um, so valid to mention. Uh, Although an untouchable produces these products, once the product is finished, all these products are closely associated with temple, religion, and rituals. Three images here. The top one on the right, the village potter is producing lamps, which are used around the month of November when there is a festival of lights. The bottom image with the cow, the small pots which you see at the back are all produced in the monsoon season during December and January. And those pots are made and produced and supplied to customers who will use it for a special festival, which is the Harvest Festival, which is happens on the 14th of January, called Pongal. On the left, the gorgeous terracotta horse is also made as a ritual object or a ritual offering to a god named Ayanar. And the story is that Ayanar and his band of leaders come alive at night, and so do these horses. And Ayanar uses the horses to roam around the village and to protect the village. Um, the village potters usually make these horses only when someone goes to them and places a custom order. And the custom order happens because someone has placed a special request to their local temple. For example, if there is a sick child in the house, the father or the mother would make a promise to the local shrine that if the child got better, they would offer a terracotta horse to the temple. And this is changing. My teacher wrote an article once, which is already 20 years ago. He wrote this article that a road to the village is opening doors to the village potter and people who are living in the village, but it is also bringing people, the same road is leading people out of the village. People are not using terracotta pottery in their kitchens anymore. People are building concrete horses instead of terracotta horses because they last longer. So it would be interesting to see how in the next few decades, how this practice, even rituals develop. This is me on the left on a kick wheel. We learned everything on the kick wheel. The first 8 months is all about, Ray would come on a Monday, give you a model to make, and you repeat the model. It's all about skill and learning the craft and making your own clay. No pug mills, no clay shops. I wish we had a continental clay shop in Pondicherry, but what happened in the long process is you really understood the material. You understood what all goes in to this one material, which now is wrapped up in a plastic bag. along with developing the clay recipes, you also learned to study about the shrinkage, all the ceramic geeky things. It was really, in some ways, all the geeky things we learned because other things were not available to us. And I love those situations where certain things are not available, and the limitation, instead of looking at it as a limitation, challenges people to innovate and adapt. In my 10th month, Ray gave me an exercise to make a form of my own based on anything that interests me. I kind of went back to my dance background. A few years before I encountered clay, I was studying bronze statues. The form in the middle on the left is of earliest evidence of a lost wax bronze statue from the Harappan civilization, which is 2000 BCE. And in doing research for this form, I also came to know that the bronze statue is an imitation of a terracotta statue. And the terracotta sculpture is basically a shrine, a female shrine with a Harappan headdress, like an axe headdress. So since then, I have kind of gone back and forth referring this image, and on the right-hand side, you see the sculpture I made. And that particular sculpture and that symbol has come into my work quite often between 2010 and 2017. The same form kind of coming back to me in 2017 when I was in Shigaraki, Japan. But this time it kind of took inspiration from 3 different South Asian female shrines. One making a reference to Japanese stone lanterns. And this is how the finished sculpture looks. Between 2011 and 2017, I lived a nomadic life, mainly because I wanted to explore what was out there. We had a single anagama which Ray built, and it's the first and only anagama available to us. It was difficult to fire it more than twice a year. So my intent to start traveling was to be in the world and fire as many different kilns as possible, meet as many people as possible, and then see what happens. There was no clear agenda or a clear plan of where I was going. And I've always kind of recognized a certain creative restlessness in me. And very early on, I thought, I need to channel this in a creative way and look at it as a positive problem. And being in various residencies helped me to deal with that. And in some ways, it also posed material challenges. Every place I traveled to, the clay was different, the kiln was different, surface explorations were different because of the clay and the kiln being different. And knowingly or unknowingly, this entire process of living out of 2 suitcases and just leaving behind most of the stuff you have made in friends' garages and gardens really helped me to build a solid body of work and to also understand my own limitation of what I was capable of in terms of making, and as a human being. And throughout these various formal and material explorations, I've kind of often come back to exploring our connection with the objects and looking at the material I'm using and the sculptures I'm creating and their relationship to my own body. And most of the times I like to create these choreographed images where I am trying to emphasize the mutuality of this inanimate object and myself. And another way I've kind of kept my own studio practice exciting for myself is by collaborating. This is a collaboration I did with a poet, Forrest Gander. This is called Compass Rose, and the second one is called Interior Landscape. I first heard Forrest talk about, he's a very visual poet. I also happen to live with him now. He's my life partner, not just a collaborator anymore. But my earliest memory of listening to Forrest was almost like looking at poetry as a visual form. He was making a reference to a poem he wrote in one of the residencies. He talked about being in this residency away from home, going for a run every morning just to create a certain kind of a routine for himself. And he wrote a particular poem. He published it. He forgot about it, like we all do. Several months later, he happened to see this poem on a page. And amazingly, the structure of the poem reminded him of the trail he used to run every morning. And this really, that imagery really stayed with me. So that kind of material exploration along with formal exploration within poetry, I like to bring that element into my practice. And one thing I have learned from collaborations is you always go in with an open mind, and you don't know when your collaborator is going to challenge what you have believed your entire life and shatter it into pieces. And that has to be a good progress thing to bring into your own practice. This is all from my newish body of work. These are now on view in Shoshana Wayne Gallery in Los Angeles. In 2017, I moved to California, initially thinking that I was going to be here for 6 months. And in some weird way, you know, my teacher left from California and ended up in Pondicherry, and like a full circle, I kind of ended up being in his birth state. I grew up not only in a small village, but also in an agrarian community. Most of the time, what to make for dinner was dependent on what was growing in the backyard. For me, it was very important to know the names of plants and trees and names of the birds which I was seeing around me. So some of the research for this body of work began as trying to make sense of the place, sense of a place which now I call home. But around the same time, my entry point to California was also some of the wildfires here. Until then, my immediate response to fire, immediate contact with fire, was through firing these ancient Anagama kilns. And I come from a community called Havyaks, and the name literally means that those who worship the fire. And for the longest time, being non-religious, I've told my mom that wood firing is the closest ritual I have come to believe. So being in California, having this fire all around me, I needed to make and create a new relationship with fire. So my partner Forrest and I put up a map of Northern California in our garage, and we started traveling to mostly local trails in the beginning. But then I got interested in studying post-fire forest. So I got in touch with some biologists who were studying specific species re-inhabiting the post-fire forest. So some of these research trips took me to Yosemite, to Sierra, to around Sonoma, to Southern California, to foothills of Sierras. It was kind of impossible for me to work in the same fashion once I got back from these research trips. Something else was happening in me emotionally, and I just gave into that calling. So this body I call as Assembling California series. The title pays a homage to John McPhee's book on the complex geology of California. He does pretty much the same thing. He travels. It's like a beautiful travel geology book if you're interested. So I was kind of creating my own map of a personal field survey of the land I now call home. During the last year, in some ways, when the entire Bay Area went into shelter in place, I had so much material, photographs, videos, notes, watercolor drawings, quick sketches I have done out in the trail. I went through a time when for 3 months I didn't have a physical studio. And interestingly, that challenge also kind of made me question certain things about my own practice. In some ways, I stopped looking at studio as one physical entity, and studio became what I carry with me all the time, the way I want to live my life, the way I have chosen to live my life as an artist. So some of these new work, these are from an upcoming show in Lucy Lacoste Gallery, which is in Concord, Massachusetts. And the inspiration from these have come from literally from my background, backyard. The photo on the right is a large bowl, almost like a bowl which is used for ritual offerings, but created from an imprint from a tree stump which is in my backyard. I'm also kind of making a geeky reference to ceramic clay lovers here. You know, all clay people, when you pick up an object, you know, especially if you're picking up a tea bowl, for example, I've often seen clay people to turn the object around and also lift to see the bottom. So I'm kind of playing around that, and therefore the imprint I collected from this tree stump is at the bottom of the piece. My color palette has definitely changed compared to what I was seeking from my work 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I used to use one slip and one glaze. Rest everything, I let the wood and the flame do the work. Now I'm quite enjoying, like 10 years ago, if you told me that I would spend time researching glazes, I wouldn't have believed you. But right now I'm looking for these shiny glaze, which kind of resembles a banana slug, because I've fallen in love with banana slugs. And uh, the highly fundamental Hindu nationalistic government, which is running my country right now, ruined the color orange for me. So it finally took me several years to be away from my home country to kind of reclaim that color. And I'm enjoying being able to use it without the first reference going to this particular political party. To the left is a wasp nest, a gift from my husband. To the right is a serpentinite rock, which is found on the top of Mount Tam, which once in some weird, unimaginable to humans geological time belonged in the bottom of the sea floor. That is from the Mount Tam, which is only an hour away from where I live. Most of my work is still taking me out in the wilderness. Most of the research is still happening out in the trails. That's where my work is going. I have a short 2 minutes video to end this presentation with, and then I would love to open the floor for questions. Okay, how do I navigate this? The not so camera shy people, if you want to turn your videos on, would be nice to see faces. Hello. Open to any questions. People who are shy to ask questions can put in the questions in the chat box.
Can I ask you a question on voice, Ashwini?
Yeah.
That last piece is very temporal, and your other pieces are, have a physicality and are, grounded in a thought process and experience. Can you talk as an artist, like how you're thinking about that? And being nomadic and sort of displaced maybe is too pejorative a term, from a studio space, but how that affects your thinking in terms of permanence and temporality and things like that.
Thanks, Randy. In some ways, early on in the practice, I stayed away from making any direct reference to dance, basically because I didn't want the work to be viewed only through some exotic lens and only that reference. So I have kind of, when the studio was not available to me, I went back to exploring things I could do within a room or outdoors, not just collecting materials, but in terms of pushing the material, or in terms of seeing how I want to bring clay more than just as a finished object, which goes through an already known stages. You make something, it dries, you fire it, you bisque fire it, you glaze it. In some ways, I know that process. So I was looking for elements which would shake my practice a little bit. It was also a way to bring in elements of dance directly in contact with clay, elements of my interest in poetry, interest in text, words, imagery, metaphors. These are the things you can talk about it. I've learned how to talk about an abstract sculpture and give a conceptual narrative behind the work. But I think a temporal work allows me to really be in that moment and feel it. And I am hoping that the viewers get to feel that as well. So these performative works I started only a year ago. Like today, while showing the video, I'm already making mental notes of, oh, if I did this video, if I did this performance again, I would do it completely differently. I would change this, I would change that. I like working with installations for that same reason too. In some ways, they have a performance quality to it. Depending on the space, the installation can change entirely and bring in new meanings as well. I basically see myself working in the studio, off the studio, on the street, on the trails. I think that's I have been multi-disciplinary at the core, but I think it is becoming much more part of my everyday studio practice. Did I answer that?
Yeah,
okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, I'd love to comment.
Yeah.
I jumped on 10, 15 minutes late, but what I caught, I am so grateful for. Your presentation was stunning, and I don't know, it kind of feels like it kind of pulled at my heartstrings too, or my inner thoughts, just the laughing at yourself and not being intimidated by things. And when you hit something that's not familiar, you work through it instead of thinking of it as a roadblock. Like, that is so inspiring. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the dance background. I really think that it to me it reminds me that each of us, whether we're all ceramic artists, I'm not sure, or have any kind of affiliation to clay, but it could be in anything we do, even if we're not ceramic artists on this call, that everything informs everything. Your dance background informing your clay practice. And that's really a cool concept, I think, coming in just multifaceted, and everybody's work is individual because of their previous experiences and impressions. And I just think that's really powerful. Also, my question, I guess, to you too, I did a small amount of dance, but I always have music in my head, and I'm aware of how music can change the work that I'm doing. And I'm wondering if you listen to music when you work, and if you've noticed that, is it music can change my mood, and make me lighter, or make me, more melancholy, or if I'm sad, it can kind of lift me up, whatever it is. But I'm wondering if you use music in a way in your practice. Thank you.
Not much. I don't listen to music when I work, because it sets a mood, like you said. And I'm someone who I listen to one thing and I press the repeat mode. I'm one of those people. And I usually listen to audiobooks when I'm working. But music is a big part of my life. Otherwise, I listen to music when I'm gardening. So it's a different kind of a connection there. Also, I think being out in the wilderness, out in open, coming in contact with earth in a different way, there I have space for my fluctuating moods. But I think I'm a little too scared that those fluctuating moods may be too interfering in my studio work. I do want to work with, there's another performative piece I've done, which is available on my Vimeo, which was part of the NCCA annual this year, which was all virtual. But when I was working for that, I still used poetry in that. But the new piece I'm working currently does not have poetry. I'm trying to bring in words as material along with clay, and keep the audio to only music, for the same reason, to evoke a certain mood. I don't know where that goes. If I meet you, Debbie, in a year, I'll be able to tell you what that exploration was.
I look forward to that too. Thank you for the answer. That's awesome.
Thanks. We have 1 minute for one more question.
You sound like PBS.
Hey, we're
Answer this
You're a
question
liar.
or less.
Unless you want to use that for NCC segue, if you want to. But truly, I'm super grateful to be here to share this with all of you. Thanks for making the time. And last 2-3 weeks have not been easy for me. It's I've constantly been in a situation not being able to focus, thinking about what's happening in India and my family there. So having to sit down to make a presentation for this, I kind of lost my track because I kept wandering around looking at all other India images as if I was looking at them for the first time. But it also gave me a focus. It also gave me a clear direction to be with all of you and talk about this. So it has helped me. So thank you for that opportunity as well.